A massive red tide outbreak in Sarasota and Bradenton. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds in case you need to click off the video because the images are fairly strong. It is newsworthy for us to understand what's happening along the coast of Florida, but the images of what we're seeing wash up along the shores is pretty strong, so I don't want to show it at the start of the video. If this may upset you, you may just not want to watch today's video. But if you're okay with that, what we're about to see in its proper context is what people are posting on social media about what's washing up along the coast of Southwest Florida, particularly Sarasota and Bradenton. Now, the red tide maps have yet to show high levels in Sarasota and Bradenton, but what we're seeing along the coast says it all. Let's watch these images of what people are posting on social media about what's washing up along the coast of Sarasota and Bradenton today on the 17th of February. Alright guys, so this is what people are posting on Facebook. Fish from Longboat Key, Siesta Key, Lido Key, Bradenton Beach. We're seeing groupers, sea turtles, apparently manatees, extraordinarily large Goliath groupers, lots of small dead fish. So we're talking Sarasota, Manatee County. This is a large red tide fish kill. And all of this happened today, even sea turtles and other species. So we're talking about a massive event of red tide in Southwest Florida. I was the first person to report on this situation out of Nokomis Beach, and I got extraordinarily sick with symptoms similar to COVID. The red tide doesn't just hurt the fish, it can actually be fatal for humans as well. Those who have asthma and other sensibilities need to be very careful. The symptoms for me were my throat was really scratchy and painful. I have a very high fever. I still have it. I had very sweaty in the entire night, very tired, fatigued. You can probably hear my voice, sinus congestion like I've never had before, sneezing and runny nose for hours on end like I've never had before. That is what I have based off my exposure and getting you guys the videos along the coast. I am extraordinarily sensitive to the red tide. Now, I have a few friends who also got exposure to the red tide in Sarasota and Bradenton, and their symptoms were exactly the same as mine. Throat complications, congested, dizziness, fever, so it almost feels like a COVID. Now, I work along the coast. I do Uber driving as a side gig, and most of my YouTube videos are along the coast, so this is going to affect my work dramatically. I got so sick that I'm not going to be able to go along the coast, so I got to figure out what I'm going to do for work for the next few days. And sometimes these events can last weeks, even months. I mean, we've seen it in Lee County stick around for months at a time. There's a lot of people who work in restaurants, resorts, hotels, hospitality, construction along the coast that are very sensitive to the red tide. These individuals, if they go and they expose themselves to the red tide or near the water, they're going to get sick again and again, and eventually they can have really serious medical complications. So a lot of people, if you notice that you're sensible to the red tide, don't keep re-exposing yourself because you're going to end up really sick. Now, I didn't have a choice. I had to report on the red tide. In theory, I should be up there tomorrow in the morning to record more of the red tide, but I'm not going to do it. So I'm just taking a few shots from Facebook so you guys get the idea. I can't continue to expose myself. I hadn't been this sick since the last time I had COVID. It's really that bad. But just so you know that this is going to affect our metropolitan area in a very serious way. I know the red tide maps have not shown red in our area, but you're seeing Goliath groupers, manatees, and sea turtles. That's pretty straightforward. We have a really serious red tide bloom here right now. And remember who was the first YouTuber who told you this before anybody else. As always, I'm working diligently to keep you guys posted on everything that's happening here in Florida. So this is going to affect the local labor force in a lot of ways. A lot of tourists are getting sick. I had an Uber passenger which I picked up at the beach, and this poor girl looked like she was ready to go to the ER. So a lot of people are getting sick from the red tide. Now, I lived in Southwest Florida, Naples, 10,000 feet from the Gulf of Mexico. And I've been sick from the red tide before, nothing like this. There's something more potent about this red tide and how it's affecting humans, because I've been sick from the red tide before, but this is the worst I've ever been sick from the red tide. This is just a whole different level. I think the concentrations in the air are extraordinarily high. We had a wind directly out of the south, so facing the south right now. Out of that direction, that's where the red tide bloom is. The wind blew out of the south for 25, 30 miles an hour for a whole day, and that brought in the air the red tide. So they do water samples, they don't do air samples. So it could be that in the air we have extraordinarily high concentrations, but they're not checking the air quality, they're checking the water quality. Perhaps it hasn't hit the water yet, it's in the air, so it's going to affect humans much more severely than it would fish right now. Some people are not affected by the red tide at all, but if you have the sensibilities, the first symptoms are a dizziness, you feel like your head is light, you feel sinus pressure, then you start to have a headache. After that, you start to feel a little bit of confusion. Then your throat starts to itch and hurt and burn. Your eyes may hurt and burn. You'll start coughing and sneezing. And from there, you'll probably get into fevers and even worse for some people. So this is a very serious health complication for some. Now, I've been around the red tide in Naples and Fort Myers, and I can tell you that the amount of people that are getting sick up here is insane. It's abnormal. There's just something about the air concentration that's much higher than before. And I've never got this sick, and other people that have got sick are telling me that these are the symptoms. So I've already encountered like 4, 5, 6 people who've had the symptoms, and they're the same exact symptoms that I'm having. So we know that it's from the red tide. The last day that I Uber drove along the coast, I ended up taking people from the beach, and before they got back, they were really, really sick. And I was driving passengers to the beach, and as we approached the beach, some of the passengers would get really sick as we approached. Others were completely unaffected, so every person is different. But if you have a sensibility to the red tide, you notice these symptoms, you need to get away from the water. If you live and work near the water, you need to really reconsider what you're going to do seriously, because it will make you very sick, and the symptoms do not go away. In the past, when I've dealt with red tide, I've left Florida. A week or two later, I'm still dealing with the symptoms. So if you get into contact with red tide and it does affect you, getting away from the water will still leave your symptoms lingering around for quite a while. So there's not too much research or explanations about how red tide affects people. It's kind of just a shallow discovery of the symptoms. But I will tell you, as a friend, as a subscriber watching today's videos, be careful with the red tide. It will make you dearly sick. This is probably one of the last things that we need here. We're dealing with the hurricane destruction. We're dealing with people boycotting the state of Florida. We're dealing with so many problems here in Florida right now. And now for this to come along at the peak of the tourist season, it's horrendous. As I speak to you, last night I had a fever the whole night. I sweated the whole night. It's 1:50 a.m. right now, and I can start to feel the fever coming back on. I live as far inland as Lakewood Ranch, but yesterday when I walked outside in the morning, I could smell the red tide and feel it that far inland. So this is a very large event that will lead to a lot of hospitalizations for people. So take care of yourselves. Don't go near the water if you don't need to. And if you've noticed that you're getting sick near the water, do not prolong your existence near the water. If you notice that it's affecting you, get away from it, because the complications to your health can be long-lasting. I believe that this is one of those things that they don't want to tell us the full truth about, and they don't really want to give us the whole picture of what it really does, how long it affects you. But my experiences with red tide in Naples is really prolonged health effects, personal experience. I'm not a doctor. But anyways, be careful out there with the red tide. Take care of yourself. Stay away from the freaking water. And yes, you're going to start to see some crazy images showing up on social media as people share their experiences of the red tide. But be careful, because if you get sick, this stuff is super nasty. And this algae bloom acts somewhat like a neurotoxin on people, so it does have neurological effects that can be really bad for some people. It's serious crap, so take care of yourselves. I'm personally going into night number 2 of fevers. My exposure was what we did in Nokomis Beach and on this particular day on Anna Maria Island. So we're not even talking me going into the areas that are marked red on the map. This is in areas that didn't even show up on the map. So just be alert that just because the map doesn't say it's there doesn't mean it is. It's a daily sample of a place in the water, and this stuff seems to be going around the air more than the water. So, your call if you want to risk it.